So I want to talk about one of the best tricks that we know to help break down those barriers as soon as possible. Because what you're trying to do is to let your customers let their guard down so you can kind of see the real them to understand who they actually are. And one of the best ways to do this is by expressing your own vulnerabilities as a way of inviting the other person to do the same. I mean, Billy just did this a second ago when he was telling you about a time when he made a mistake, a time that he was not proud of. And in doing that, it opens the door for everyone else to feel a little bit better, maybe potentially criticizing themselves as well. But it feels weird to stand in front of a room and be like, tell me about when you messed up. Let me tell you about when I messed up. And then all of a sudden it's a little bit easier because you've laid this baseline of I'm going to expose myself in a way. Same as when everybody was coming up last night to tell the stories. As soon as you open up a little bit, you invite somebody else to do the same. Now, how this applies to 11 Madison Park, I'm sure you're asking yourselves. So back in, let's call it like the mid, 2000s, maybe early 2010s, I was still waiting tables at this point. And the majority of the food culture at that time, if you all remember, it was like when Anthony Bourdain was on TV. So he's like traveling to all these far-flung places, eating the wildest types of food that you can imagine. Andrew Zimmern had that show where he was just trying to outgross himself every single time. And this was basically establishing what being a foodie was. It was being adventurous and eating everything that was put in front of you. I mean, like brains and organs and all sorts of stuff. At the same time, the food culture and the restaurant culture that was going on in New York City was sort of the tyranny of the chef. Do you all remember this time period? There was literally that Time magazine cover that was like the new food gods or whatever. It was like gods of food or whatever it was. There was this idea, kind of perpetrated by these places like a Momofuku, which we love, but the idea was that you went there, you ate what the chef served you, and the chef knew better, and he knew everything. No substitutions, no allergies allowed. I don't care. I'm going to serve you the thing, and you're going to like it. And this was the prevailing food culture of like, submit yourself to the god of food. So at this time, 11 Madison Park was toying with this new menu format where we were basically trying to customize the menu to people as they came in. We genuinely wanted to build a menu that reflected their own personal tastes and what they actually liked. And so as we were doing the whole menu spiel, there were plenty of different hidden options that the guests didn't know about, but we were going to help them navigate through by asking them, first the regular questions. Do you have any allergies? Do you have any dietary restrictions? But we asked an additional question, which was, is there anything that you just prefer not to eat or generally don't like? And we meant that sincerely because the basis of that question is, if you're a person who doesn't like salmon, for instance, and we're serving a salmon that night, it doesn't matter that we just cooked you the best salmon in the entire world. The chance of you just changing your mind about salmon is probably slim to none. We're not serving you something that you actually want. So we wanted to serve things that people liked. But because of all of those things that I just told you about, nobody would answer this question. It got really uncomfortable. Because nobody wanted to be perceived as picky. Nobody wanted to be perceived as not being adventurous because it wasn't cool. You weren't a foodie. You weren't in the scene if that's something that you were doing. So after like a week or two, the kitchen was like, what is going on? Why is nobody's ordering the way that we want them to order? And Will was like, okay, let me try something. So the next table that came in, he gave them the whole menu spiel. He's like, here's what we've got going on. And then he asked them the question, hey, is there anything that you prefer not to eat or anything that you don't like? But he added a small but extremely true confession to the end of that. He said, me, for instance, I cannot stand sea urchin. And sea urchin, by the way, is like a delicacy. Personally, I love it. It's served on the menus of some of the best restaurants in the entire world. It is a rare and fine food, and the thought of it makes Will want to throw up. He's somewhere across the country at this point, knowing that I'm talking about this, and he's having some weird reaction, and he doesn't know why. It is that extreme. The man cannot stand it. But what ended up happening was that opened the door for other people to be honest about what they actually liked and didn't like as well. Because if the owner of this fancy restaurant is admitting to me that he's not into this very fancy and intimidating ingredient, then I feel comfortable sharing the things that I don't like in return. So all of a sudden we started hearing from people like, oh, you know what, I actually don't like eggplant. Or, oh, hey, I'm not really into the texture of oysters or shellfish. And we were able to provide people the experience that they wanted because they were being honest with us about what they actually did want. But the only way for us to get that type of information is if we expose ourselves in some way to have our own vulnerabilities as well. Like I was saying earlier, it's really easy for me to take this and apply it to your industry. Sometimes I have to think a little bit more creatively. But someone like myself who's approaching the service of a car, a really complicated mechanical beast that is scary and intimidating to me. If someone were to just say to me, hey, I get it, this is like a little, I get confused between a carburetor and another car part that I can't even think of right now because I only know one car part. I get confused between those two as well, and if somebody would just say something like that to me of like, hey, I know this is a lot, let me help you work through it, that's gonna make me feel so much more comfortable admitting the things that I don't know. You're gonna be able to do a better job fixing my car because I'm gonna do a better job describing it to you because I'm gonna feel comfortable exposing the things that I don't know. So that is the power of vulnerability.